Alright, this is underwater lakes that shouldn't exist.
A mile below the surface of the Red Sea
What
is
the?
something that, by all measures, shouldn't exist. A phenomenon so strange it
Oh, I'll run that back real quick. What was that?
measures shouldn't exist.
Alright, let's go.
A phenomenon so strange it's rewriting what we know about the origins of life on Earth. And perhaps
Oh, I'm gonna
even
turn off the
outside of
subtitles
it.
real quick. Okay.
In 2020, the Ocean Explorer research ship launched a submersible into the depths of the Red Sea. After 8 hours of scouring the abyssal plain, they had found nothing. Just a lifeless desert in the perpetual darkness.
Is it low-key just me though? Is it like, dude, like the sea is like, we only have explored like not even like 2% of the sea, right? Or the ocean? Like, I feel like just being on, oh my god, it's just like being underwater. It's just like that's like look, it's just super dark, can't even see anything.
But moments before they were about to give up and return to the surface, the submersible's headlights caught something in the distance. A murky shape, about 20 meters wide, which looked like a dark mirror laying flat on the seabed. Squinting, they made out what appeared to be a thick fog hanging over it. And as they got closer, they realized what they were seeing should have been impossible. The surface of that giant mirror wasn't glass or rock or even sand. It was water. How could that?
Are we serious right now? We got water underwater. Now I know the video is called underwater lakes that shouldn't exist, but like water underwater. Alright.
be? They were already underwater. But it was right there in front
There's
of
no way
their
this is
very
real.
eyes.
Oh, that's
What
fake.
appeared to be an underwater lake at the bottom of the ocean, encircled by a beach with gentle, slow-motion waves lapping against the shore. Only a handful of humans have ever seen this sight in person. And we now know something that makes it even more eerie.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Any creature who dares to venture below the surface of that strange water never comes back.
Whoa, what? What is that? It's like a crab. With legs.
And yet, down here in the deathly darkness, there is something unthinkable. A strange, primitive form of life, existing in a way completely alien to what we ever thought possible on Earth. But now, in 2025, thanks to a series of remarkable discoveries,
Those look like spiders.
this surreal underwater environment is helping to revolutionize our understanding of how life can exist on Earth. And maybe beyond. So where did this mysterious underwater lake come from? What could possibly live here? And whatever it is, could it be the key to understanding how life began? I'm James Stewart and you're watching Astrum Earth. Join me in this video as we journey beneath the surface and come face to face with whatever is hiding down there.
So that underwater
Imagine
stuff is
being
like,
able to build
okay,
an app
are we
with your
serious
name
right
on it.
now?
Now, I should start off by saying, despite making giant
That
leaps in our
underwater stuff is
understanding
just
of
like, it
underwater
kills
lakes over
whatever
the
goes
last
into
few
it.
years, Ocean Explorer was not the first to find one. The earliest reference to an underwater lake dates back to the 1st of March 1964, and it's a tiny article barely taking up a quarter of a page buried deep in a scientific journal. The author, a humble English oceanographer called Henry Shouldn, had found what he called anomalous bottom water, 2 kilometers under the Red Sea. I like to imagine the wonder and perhaps even the terror that Henry felt when research indicated it was possible for a lake to exist at the bottom of the ocean.
See, that just doesn't like. How is that even possible? We're talking like water underwater. Is it like a different density? You know how like if you do like oil and water and they're two different densities, and it's like the oil will like sink to the bottom of the water, if you know what I mean.
What it was or why it existed, he had no idea. All he knew was that it was there and that it should have been impossible. Without knowing it, Henry had stumbled on something that would shape how we understand life on our planet forever. While he could only guess at the water's origin, Henry spotted one intriguing detail. It was incredibly salty. Far saltier than the water above it. This seemingly minor observation gives
like
us the first clue to finding out what these bizarre formations actually are. It seems impossible.
It's just like
how does
salt,
a lake in the middle of an ocean exist? One thing I am not salty about is my choice of skincare. We once again partner with our friends at Geology to bring you skincare.
I don't care.
See, the more salt dissolves in the volume of water, the more dense it gets. That's why you might be able to float on your back in the sea, but not in a swimming pool. The higher salt content in the seawater makes it more dense, so relatively speaking, you become less dense and rise to the surface. It's the same with an underwater lake. That incredibly salty water is more dense than the seawater around it. So it sits at the very bottom of the ocean,
so
collecting in the natural depressions on the sea floor. In fact, the water here is so salty and so dense that a submersible literally bounces off the surface like a trampoline.
Whoa,
theoretically, if you were able to breathe and survive the pressure down there, the surface of the lake would feel like a giant waterbed.
No, that's hella crazy. It's like a drop off. So because of the salt density, that's why those creatures can't live in this like lake, right? You know how it said like they would die or something like, I don't know.
Scientists call these underwater lakes brine pools, and they can stretch up to 20 kilometers in length, forming majestic lakes, rivers, and even underwater waterfalls.
What?
But even more curiously, they can reach hundreds of meters in depth. So you might be wondering, what stops the brine from just spreading out and mixing with the surrounding seawater? How is there such a clear surface line? After all, if you were to add a splash of brine to a glass of fresh water, it wouldn't sink and collect at the bottom of the glass, would it? It would just mix in with the water, right? So what stops this from happening at the bottom of the ocean? Well, the answer comes down to two distinct natural processes working together in a unique way. The first has the complex name of double diffusive convection. And once again, Henry's observations gave us the first clue of what was happening here. That anomalous water he noticed wasn't just unusually salty, but unusually warm. So imagine, at the very bottom of the sea, you have this anomalous water that is both warm and salty.
Yeah.
Directly above it, you have water that is cooler and less salty. This means that both salt and heat in the bottom water want to spread upwards to the top water. In theory, this should mean that the extra salty water just dissolves away and gets lost in the rest of the ocean. But here's the key thing. Heat spreads 100 times faster than salt, so naturally it gets there first. This means that the water directly above the surface of the lake is warmer than usual, which causes it to rise into the water above. Meanwhile, on the other side, the water directly below the surface of the lake gets cooler, which makes it sink down into the lake.
Yeah, okay.
As a result, the top layer of the lake wants to move further down into the lake rather than up out of it.
You know what this reminds me of? If you ever watched the movie The Meg, remember how like they get all the way down and like in the submarine and they have there's like that big I don't remember what they called it, but it was like basically like this. It was like it was like basically fog almost. And under that, that's where the megalodon was. it couldn't go up above it because it was like too uh it was like warm, or no, I think it was too cold. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how it was. Is it was too cold, so the megalodon couldn't go through the fog.
And the seawater directly above it wants to move up and away from the lake rather than down into it. This double diffusive convection is what creates that sharp boundary between brine and seawater, which causes a clear tide line to form, resulting in the surreal appearance of an underwater lake. But
That's
if you're especially
cool.
eagle-eyed, you might have noticed something wrong with that model. Even if there is a clear-cut threshold between brine and regular water, there is still salt going across that line. So effectively, the lake is constantly losing brine to the water above. In theory then, the lake should vanish, like a rock pool evaporating over time. And that's where the second natural process comes in. See, underwater lakes aren't just puddles of salty water, they're constantly in flux. Just as brine is continually vanishing into the water above, it's also being replenished from underneath. The lake exists only because of the delicate natural balance between these two opposing processes, the first trying to shrink the lake and the other to grow it. So where is it being replenished from? And what is this seemingly endless source of warm, salty water coming from deep in the earth? You may have heard of plate tectonics, but to answer this question, we need to understand salt tectonics. Scientists scratched their heads about this for decades, until eventually the answer began to reveal itself. Across the entire world, we've found brine pools in just 3 places. And these 3 places all have one thing in common: a weird geological feature which allows these pools to form. The first we've mentioned already, the Red Sea.
Red Sea, yeah.
The other 2 are the Gulf of Mexico and the Mediterranean Sea. So what's the underlying feature they have in common? They're all bodies of water that aren't giant oceans, perhaps? They're all partly enclosed?
So have we not just explored
that's part
inside
of
them
the
though?
answer.
Is there not like big caverns of them?
This may be the last
Or like
ad you
big,
ever
like,
see.
trenches of
Because with
them?
the free ad block extension from Capital One Shop.
Here's the key thing. At some point in their history, all 3 of these water bodies were cut off from the ocean. During the Jurassic period, the Gulf of Mexico was sealed off from the Atlantic Ocean by a narrow strip of land. More than 100 million years later, so was the Mediterranean. And by this point, the Red Sea had also been shut off from the waters of the Indian Ocean. When these seas got closed off from the ocean, they essentially became giant basins. With no new water flowing in, the remaining water in those basins evaporated over time, leaving behind something unusual: a thick residue of salt. Over the following millions of years, that salt residue was buried by layers of sediment, which pushed it deeper and deeper into the earth. So when those dried up basins eventually rejoined the oceans and filled with seawater again, they created a unique set of geological conditions. Above you have a sea, and below you have an enormous pile of salt. It's only because of the sediment layer in between that the salt doesn't come into contact with the seawater, but you might be able to guess what happens next. As the sediment keeps piling up over time and the salt gets buried deeper into the Earth's crust, something extraordinary happens. The sediment on top gets so heavy that it begins to squash the salt underneath.
That's crazy.
Which forces it to shift and move around. This process, known as salt tectonics, causes warping and cracking in the sediment layer, which allows seawater to seep down over time and mix with the ancient salt below. This forms an ultra-concentrated brine deep down in the earth. As the sediment continues to move around, that deep underground brine, warmed by the Earth's heat, gets squeezed up into the ocean and settles on the ocean floor. Now, at last, finally, we've got ourselves an underwater lake. But brine doesn't just sit in lakes, waiting for its next victim to enter its salty domain. Brine can also flow underwater too. During a dive in 2018, the remotely operated vehicle that was part of the NOAA expedition to the Gulf of Mexico peered over a low rise in the sea floor, gazing towards the sediment-lined depression that lay below. It spotted a small pool, filled with the dark blue water we're accustomed to seeing with brine falls, accompanied by the graveyard of dead mussels and bright white shells that had fallen victim to it. But as the camera panned up, away from the pool, it captured something even more dramatic than the brine pool itself. Described by NOAA as long blue-grey-black streaks of stained sediment, juxtaposed against the tan-coloured slope above the brine pool. So tracing the sediment path upwards, brine appeared to be flowing from above, down the slope and into the pool below. What they had found was an undersea brine waterfall. It's possible this particular waterfall began to form over 180 million years ago during the Jurassic period.
That's crazy.
Subsequently, it has cut upwards towards the sea floor in columns and ridges known as diapirs. The concentrated brine fluid, much denser than salt water as we've discussed, can flow onto the sea floor. The diapirs act like channels, directing the brine towards the low-lying areas it occupies and creating the waterfall. But what manner of creature could possibly survive down here, if indeed anything can survive at all?
That's a big crab.
Phew. Okay, so now we know what these underwater lakes are and where they come from.
So if we
Let's
went
dive
in
into
there,
the
are
real
we just
question.
dead?
What is lurking
those,
down there?
Those
and
creatures?
what does it mean for us? At a first glance, the conditions don't exactly seem ideal for life. Unsettlingly, scientists found the shorelines littered with the corpses of fish, crabs, lobsters, and eels. What they didn't know is that some of those corpses have been there for decades, preserved in the super salty water, like an underwater mass grave of mummified sea creatures.
That's hella
But they soon
creepy.
realised what was happening. Whenever a fish or eel passed by, which admittedly was quite a rare sight on the deep abyssal plain, scientists noticed they mostly avoided the briny water. And when they did wander below the surface, they rarely came back. Within a few seconds of diving below the lake, they were struck by violent convulsions. Fish writhed uncontrollably, and eels wrenched themselves in knots. This toxic shock is caused by the extreme level of salt, and it's the fate of any unlucky creature that ventures too deep into the lake. Once it strikes, their only hope is to rise above the surface into the familiar ocean water above. Most, however, are not so lucky. Because of these extreme levels of salt, underwater lakes are also anoxic,
cool, though.
meaning there is no oxygen for life to survive. At least not as we know it. And if that weren't inhospitable enough, the salty anoxic water is also loaded with toxic methane, which should surely snuff out any remaining chance of life. You would really think this is the worst place on Earth to live, wouldn't you?
If we go in there.
A toxic hot tub of death, miles below the ocean's surface. No oxygen, no light, alone in the perpetual darkness of the deep sea abyss. And yet there is life, a host of fantastical creatures living in one of the most extreme habitable environments on Earth. Vast colonies of bright green tube worms stretch for hundreds of meters in all directions. Giant 100-year-old mussels packed tightly around the shores of the lake. This mussel beach is home to a carnival of shrimps, snails, weird squat lobsters, and jelly-like crabs.
Yeah.
Even larger predators like fish, octopuses, and cutthroat eels come to the lake in search of food, like a watering hole on the African savannah. But most successfully of all...
What was that dude doing?
Like a watering hole on the African savannah. But most successfully of all, hagfish. These slimy eel-shaped fish lurk on the water's edge, waiting for unsuspecting prey to wander into the brine. The moment that toxic shock takes hold, the hagfish swoops in and snatches their body for food.
Ooh.
These hagfish are ancient creatures, even older than dinosaurs. Often called living fossils, they're strikingly similar to the very first vertebrates to appear on Earth hundreds of millions of years ago.
What?
But recently,
That's
scientists noticed something
crazy.
even more curious about them.
So these are older than dinosaurs.
They are the only animals that seem to be immune to the toxic effects of the lake. While all others die in seconds, hagfish come and go as they please,
It's like
diving into the
parasites.
lake to catch their food. This, among other things, is a mystery yet to be solved. Even more staggering than how our hagfish thrives down here is how the ecosystem itself does, because it involves a toxic gas. So how on earth does this alien ecosystem actually survive? Not only is there no oxygen, extreme salinity, and a cocktail of toxic gases, there is also no sun. In fact, the submersible's headlight is the first light that has shone here since the ocean was formed. Before deep sea ecosystems like these were discovered, scientists thought all life was powered by the sun. Green plants soak up the sun's energy and turn it into food through photosynthesis. These plants, which are then eaten by animals, form the base of the food chain. Oddly enough, this applies even in the deep ocean where the sun doesn't reach. Life here still survives on morsels of food that drift down from the surface. A marine snow
What was that?
made of dead plankton, sea plants and other food, all of which derive their energy from the sun.
With Ride Check, we'll automatically check in if
I
the unexpected
don't
happens on your ride.
care.
The only way natural, delicious mangoes from the harvest.
But when researchers first stumbled upon brine pool environments, it was clear that this was something different. An oasis of life completely independent from the sun. Instead, these creatures seem to have their own mysterious source of life-supporting energy. So if it's not the sun, what do they live on? To find the answer, we need to look inside the mussels that cluster around the shores of the lake. Under a microscope, scientists found that the interiors of their shells were packed with bacteria. Now, these weren't ordinary bacteria like the kind we see every day. These were specialized bacteria with one extraordinary ability, which holds the key to the survival of the entire
what the hell? They're
ecosystem.
like
They can turn chemicals
smell like
into
sperms.
food. The specific chemical is methane, and fortunately for them,
Yeah,
brine pools are loaded with it. This is called chemosynthesis. Just as green plants turn sunlight into food through photosynthesis, these bacteria can do the same thing with methane spewing out from deep in the earth. So unlikely as it may seem,
That's
the
crazy.
toxic soup, which kills almost any
Look
animal
how
that
big that
touches it,
crab
is actually the very thing that keeps them alive. Just as plant photosynthesis is the basis of life for all animals in the sun, these chemosynthetic bacteria turn the toxic methane in the pools into the lifeblood of an entire ecosystem. The bacteria themselves live deep in the gills of the mussels, both depending on the other for survival. In return for supplying them with energy, the mussels protect the bacteria from grazers and filter feeders. At the same time, they also provide a shelter to the shrimps, lobsters and crabs that live and feed amongst them. Such an abundance of life in the middle of a vast and otherwise barren abyssal plain, totally independent of the sun's energy,
That's creepy.
astounded the scientists who first found it. In fact, it seemed to them that these ancient life forms were a window into how life might have first begun. And now, in 2025, scientists increasingly wonder whether nearly 4 billion years ago, the first life on Earth might have appeared in an environment just like this. As he puts it, some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts. While it might seem so at a glance, Darwin's little pond was certainly not an underwater one, but rather a shallow tidal pool with heat, light and electricity present. This gave rise to the popular primordial soup theory,
What is that?
which imagined life was born in a warm, nutrient-rich rock pool, spectacularly flashed into being by a bolt of lightning. This idea persisted for almost a century.
It's just so interesting.
But in the late 1900s,
never
when we
would have thought
discovered
this was
deep-sea
even, like, a thing.
chemosynthetic environments like brine pools, everything we thought we knew about life's origins was turned on its head. If life could clearly survive without the sun, then could it have started in a similar way? The first of these chemosynthetic environments to be found wasn't actually a brine pool, but something called a hydrothermal vent. Hydrothermal vents are enormous smoking chimneys at the bottom of the deep ocean, spewing out torrents of superheated chemical soup from deep in the earth. Much like brine pools, around these vents, scientists found an abundance of life, surviving not from the sun's energy, but from the energy in that chemical soup, harvested by colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria. The discovery was groundbreaking. Even today, more than 50 years after they were first discovered, the conventional view says that hydrothermal vents are the most likely site for the very first life on Earth. But now there's another contender. Before brine pools were discovered, it was inconceivable that life could survive in such extremely salty conditions. But in recent years, the uncovering of rich bacterial and
Those eels are
complex
just like,
life there widens the goalposts for how and where life can survive. And there's one even more tantalizing piece of evidence that points towards a brine pool-like environment as the potential cradle of life. We know life almost certainly appeared somewhere in the ocean between 3.5 and 4 billion years ago. But here's the interesting thing. Scientists think Earth's primordial oceans at the time were number 1, poor in oxygen, number 2, rich in methane, and number 3, most intriguingly of all, extremely salty. What else is poor in oxygen, rich in methane, and extremely salty? A brine pool.
Yeah.
What this means is the brine pool environment is...
So basically, the underwater lake is called, it's a brine pool, based full of methane, which is why most of those creatures that go in there which is why it's basically like a graveyard for a lot of those sea creatures. And it's just like caused by ancient, like years and years of just ancient salt from under the earth, right?
Remarkably similar
I'm
to
correct.
the conditions in Earth's ancient oceans at the exact time life began. That's why scientists who study them think they might be the best analogue we have of the place where life first began. And to take this a step further, could these alien environments guide the ongoing search for life beyond Earth? While this, after all, is a channel about Earth, not space, let's just take a moment to imagine. If some environment similar to brine pools were to exist elsewhere in the solar system, or even beyond that, it would be as good a place as any to find life. Two of the most likely contenders are Europa, a moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, a moon of Saturn. This is because beneath their icy crust, they both have vast underground oceans of liquid water. What's more, these oceans are likely as salty as the oceans on early Earth, potentially creating similar conditions to those where life began on Earth. Before the discovery of deep-sea chemosynthetic environments like brine pools, these subterranean oceans would have been written off as unsuitable for life. This is because the layer of crust above blocks out the sunlight, previously thought to be essential to support living beings. But now, it's a far more exciting story. Deep in the pitch-black oceans of these two distant moons, could there be briny oases of life hidden beneath the ice? It's certainly possible. Either way, we'll have to wait at least until the year 2030 to find out, when NASA's dedicated Clipper spacecraft will finally arrive at Europa and begin its search for life. Of course, we're leaning towards speculation here. We simply don't know enough about brine pool environments to make concrete claims that life began under similar conditions, or that they can be found beneath the ice of Europa and Enceladus. What we do know is they completely changed our understanding of how life can exist. And on top of that, there's one thing we can say with no doubt at all. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of these surreal underwater environments, the potential for incredible discoveries only grows. After all, who knows what wealth of secrets might still be lurking below the surface, just waiting to be found.
Damn. That's crazy. Full credit, by the way, to Astrum Earth. And yeah. You know, in the comments, let me know what you guys want me to react to next. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.